It's Chris Bader. I'm a professor of sociology at Chapman University, and I research a lot of different things, but I would say that primarily my areas of interest are beliefs. So I study paranormal beliefs, I study religion. I also have interest in criminology and deviant behavior. Been studying fear for quite some time, what people are afraid of, how that affects their behaviors. My academic interest in the paranormal really stemmed from a childhood interest. I'm a child who grew up in the age of In Search Of, shows such as that really popularized on television the ideas of Bigfoot and UFOs and ghosts, and that fascinated me when I was a kid. And when I grew up, once I became an academic and a sociologist, I realized that nobody was really studying this from a academic perspective, and I can talk about what it means to study the paranormal from a sociological perspective here in a minute. But what I'd like to do is I'm just going to kind of go briefly through some of the key findings that we have, and I say we because I have a couple of co-authors on this book, and I'm going to try to get through that pretty quickly because I know people have a lot of questions about the paranormal. I can answer questions about the people that I've met, what we know about the paranormal. I've been on more ghost hunts and Bigfoot searches than I can count, so I can tell you about those or answer questions about any of them if you want. But I think first it's important to understand what it means to be a sociologist studying the paranormal. And the first thing to understand is if you came to this talk hoping that I would either tell you that the paranormal is real or tell you all the reasons why you shouldn't believe it, then you're going to be disappointed on either end. Because as a sociologist, that doesn't really interest me, to be honest. As a sociologist, any belief is meaningful and impactful if it changes people, influences their behavior, has an effect on culture. And it doesn't matter to me as a sociologist. It may interest me personally, but as a sociologist, it doesn't matter to me if UFOs are real, if people believe in them or claim to see them. And so I don't spend my time when I'm studying the paranormal trying to analyze a piece of hair that is on a Bigfoot hunt or something like that, because that's not my area of expertise. So what I do study when it comes to the paranormal is I try to understand how paranormal beliefs change over time. What we believe about UFOs today is not the same things we believed about UFOs in the 1970s. Bigfoot has changed over time. What people believe it is to be, where they think Bigfoot is from, what they think Bigfoot looks like, all these things change over time. They're not static. And I look at how paranormal beliefs impact the believers. What effect does it have on you when you believe you've seen a Bigfoot or think UFOs are visiting your house? I look at patterns of belief. If people believe in one paranormal thing, do they tend to believe in others? And I'm also interested just simply in the growth of these beliefs. In 20 years, will more people believe in the paranormal than do today? Will it become a major thing, whereas today it's, in most cases, it's a minor thing? So those are the types of things that I look at. Of course, when I spend time with paranormal believers, paranormal investigators, they're all the time showing me pieces of evidence. But again, my goal is not to assess that evidence. So this is what I mean when I'm talking about the paranormal. This is what I think is unique about it. What interests me about it is that what the paranormal actually consists of are a set of beliefs, practices, and experiences that are what I call doubly damned. And what I mean by that is if you are someone who is heavily interested in the paranormal, then you've probably noticed a couple of things. You've probably noticed, first of all, that science doesn't pay much attention to it. That your average scientist, if you were to tell them you've seen a UFO, would try to explain to you why you didn't see a UFO, why you saw a shooting star, why you misidentified a bird, because science does not believe in UFOs as a whole. Obviously, there are some individual scientists who do, but science does not believe in ghosts as an institution, does not believe in Bigfoot. Those are things where science says, get out of here, come back to us when you got a body. But the other thing is that the paranormal also consists of these specific beliefs that aren't part of religion either. Every culture has certain religious beliefs, which are the majority religious beliefs. And in our culture, the majority religion, meaning all I mean by majority, is practiced by the greatest number of people, Christianity. And I'm getting an echo here, someone has their mic on. But so in the United States, Christianity is the majority religion. And so therefore, there are some beliefs that are associated with Christianity. They also cannot be proven. You have to take them on faith. And those become part of what is the institution of religion. So the paranormal, in my definition, are those things that fall outside of both. Science doesn't believe in Bigfoot. There is no church of Bigfoot. So Bigfoot lies in this strange middle ground caught between science and religion. And what that means, and what I've seen with the paranormal, is that over time, paranormal beliefs might drift one way or the other. That a paranormal group might try to make themselves scientific by trying to come up with ways to prove their particular type of belief, whatever it is, prove the existence of ghosts. Or they might decide that science is not what they want to do and drift more towards religion or spirituality. And this is an example here that when a paranormal group tries to make themselves more scientific, we call that discovery. And that's when this picture you see here is a call blaster. And that is a device used by Bigfoot hunters where it plays loud sounds, sometimes just animals in distress, other times it plays purported Bigfoot screams. And the idea is that this will supposedly draw a Bigfoot in the area in. So Bigfoot hunters in particular are a group which have really been trying to make Bigfoot hunting into something that scientists will recognize as legitimate. So they have a lot of equipment. They practice a sort of citizen or amateur science. But other times beliefs or parts of beliefs can drift towards religion. And in the UFO community, there has been a fairly significant segment that have drifted more towards religion. And over on the right here, you see George King, who believed he was in contact with aliens. And rather than trying to prove that aliens exist, he went a different route and turned his belief in aliens into a religion. His religion is called the Other Society. It's a group that believes that that George King channeled aliens, and instead of having a sermon, when the Other Society meets, it has several congregations around the world. They listen to tapes of the now deceased George King, who is channeling extraterrestrials. Those are their gods, so to speak. So this paranormal can do either one of these things or both over time. Segments can drift more towards spirituality or enlightenment. Segments can drift more towards this discovery or trying to prove things. This here just shows you, and this interests me, just over time, is finding out how much beliefs are changing. This is the most current data I have on what percentage of Americans believe in paranormal topics. This doesn't cover all paranormal topics, but it covers a fairly good portion of them. The most popular, as you can see, nearly equal, are the belief in ghosts. Ghosts are one of the most common beliefs, and it's pretty perennial over time. I don't see much growth or decrease in it. But you see that the majority of Americans, slight majority, but a majority nonetheless, think that places can be haunted by spirits, and also a majority believe that ancient advanced civilizations, places like Atlantis or Lemuria or Mu, once existed. Following that are aliens. Belief in aliens are pretty popular. It's actually more common to believe that aliens were once here in our ancient past, like is reflected in a very popular show called Ancient Aliens. And about a third of Americans believe that aliens are here now, that they've come to Earth in modern times. The belief that we've actually seen the highest percentage of growth in has been belief in Bigfoot, that in the last 5 years, actually 7 years, excuse me, that belief has gone up from about 14% of the population to almost a fourth, a fifth of the population right now, that believe that Bigfoot is a real creature. And I think that's likely due to all the Bigfoot television shows that are on these days. What I like to think of, if you were in a room with a group full of random Americans, what could you assume about them? The interesting thing I find is that the majority of Americans, more than 2/3, believe in one of these things. It's a little bit more difficult to determine what an American believes in. But if you were in a room with a random group of 100 people, you could assume that most of those people believe in one of them. But what we find amongst people that I think is really interesting is what we call particularistic skepticism. And I've run into this countless times, where someone will tell me that they think the idea of UFOs are silly and don't know how anyone could believe in UFOs, and then in hushed tones tell me about the ghost that lives in their house. Or I have experienced many talks with many Bigfoot hunters who will tell me about their Bigfoot sighting and then make fun of people who believe in ghosts. That's very common, where people will have this particularistic skepticism, where they believe in one of these things or two of them and don't believe in the others. So most Americans don't believe in most of these things or all of them, but most Americans believe in at least one of them. And the other thing that's important to me when I'm studying paranormal beliefs is to understand that people really vary on how they engage with it. The simplest thing to do is just to say that you believe in something. If I was just to ask you, do you believe that Bigfoot is a real creature, just to say yes or no, and about 21% of Americans say that. But what's much more rare is to engage with it further, and these are people that really interest me, and those are people who have had related experiences. The percentage of people who have actually seen Bigfoot is so small they wouldn't even show up on a survey. There are thousands of them in the United States, but they're unlikely to show up on a survey because it's a rare experience. Other people get so interested in the paranormal that they start consuming materials. They start watching the television shows. They start reading related books or reading blogs on the internet. And also people can get engaged, that this is the most serious level of the paranormal, when people will actually join a group, go out on ghost hunts. Maybe we have some ghost hunters or Bigfoot hunters here. I know Salt Fork State Park is full of big feet in Ohio. That's the most serious form, when you get engaged with a group and actually go out and study these things. And this shows you some of the comparative rarity of these experiences. About the most popular or common paranormal experience is for someone to do something very light, which is consulting a horoscope. That is about the lowest level of engagement you can have with the paranormal, is simply to look at your newspaper or look online and look at your horoscope. And about a third of Americans say yes, they've actually done that. They've seriously looked at their horoscope, taken something from it. The next most common is to believe that you have lived in a haunted house, either currently or in the past, and that's about a fifth of Americans. Following close behind is witnessing a UFO. That's fairly common. A little less than a fifth of Americans think that they have seen a UFO or witnessed one. If you're trying to figure out how can I determine if my neighbor believes in the paranormal, we did find some key factors. A big factor in determining what type of paranormal things you believe is gender. That we find that that men are much more interested in those forms of the paranormal, where you're going out and investigating and bringing a lot of equipment. We call those discovery. And we found that women, in all the surveys we've done, are more interested in things where it's less about trying to prove that something exists and more about how you can better yourself, such as going to a psychic to learn about your future, having your aura read. Now, that is not to say, of course, that women don't hunt Bigfoot and men don't go to psychics. That's not true. What I'm saying is that there are strong tendencies that women are more likely to go to psychics than men. Men are more likely to hunt Bigfoot than women. But in terms of all paranormal beliefs, there is sort of a popular stereotype out there. The people who believe in the paranormal are going to be people of lower levels of education and therefore lower levels of income, and that's just simply not true. Over a long period of time, we've found that the person who is more likely to believe in the paranormal is someone who actually has a higher level of education and a higher level of income, that there's a positive correlation there. So anyone who tells you that people believe in the paranormal because they haven't gone to enough school or haven't had enough schooling, that's just wrong. And I think the final thing I'll throw at you before I see what questions you have is that religion has an interesting and complicated effect or relationship with the paranormal. That if we think about someone's religiosity, and here I'm talking about that they belong to a mainstream religious group in the United States. So in this case, the majority religion is Christianity in the United States. We can think about how religious they are. Are they very, very religious, meaning they go to church once a week, maybe even twice if they're going to a Wednesday Bible study? Do they have a more conservative or literal view of the Bible? Do they contribute a lot to their church? That's someone we would say is very religious. Someone who is not religious, it could be all the way to the end of that person being an atheist, saying that there is no God, there are no higher powers. Or it could be someone who is dragged to church by their spouse, but doesn't really believe all that much. We've found over time that there's what we call a curvilinear relationship, that people who are atheists, not interested in religion, don't like religion, religion doesn't connect with them, don't tend to believe in the paranormal either. And that makes sense if you think about it. If you reject religion in general, reject the idea that there can be something beyond the physical world that can be requires faith, that you probably wouldn't believe in ghosts and UFOs either. But we also find that very religious people don't tend to believe in the paranormal either. Or if they do, they tend to believe in it in a different way. That extremely religious groups, the very conservative ones, tend to tell their members one of two things: either that the paranormal doesn't exist, that they shouldn't bother studying it or looking into it, or that the paranormal is the work of the devil, that UFO you saw was actually the devil trying to trick you. If you go to a very conservative Christian bookstore, you will find books on the paranormal, but that argue that the paranormal is real, but argue that it's not what you think it is. That's actually the work of the devil. So where we find the highest level of paranormal belief is at moderate levels of religiosity. In other words, if I was looking for someone that is most likely to believe in the paranormal, I would be looking for that person who goes to sort of a moderate Christian church, if we're talking about the United States, who goes maybe once or twice a month, that believes there's something to the Bible but doesn't believe it's to be taken literally. That person who showed an interest in religion but doesn't have this extremely literal take on it is the most likely to believe in the paranormal. And so, for example, in the United States, mainline Protestants are way more likely to believe in the paranormal than are evangelical Protestants. So those are sort of the trends that I've found. I've got a lot that I could talk about the paranormal, so I just want to open it up at this point, I think, Kevin.
All right. If anybody has any questions, you can unmute yourself and send your question to Dr. Bader.
And what I'll say here too is that I have pictures from ghost hunts I could show you if you want, but I think I'd rather save that for later and see if we have any questions first.
I got one question. Most good paranormal investigation teams, don't they cover like all aspects of it, you think, from the person that's religious to, you know, the skeptic and the person that don't believe at all and everything in between?
Say, do you mean the membership of those paranormal groups? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. Some paranormal groups, I've spent time with a lot of them. I wouldn't say all of them. But certainly, yes, their membership does sometimes include atheists. I found that to be fairly rare myself. I can say that I have not found myself a paranormal group that has what I would call a true skeptic. There's a lot of sort of what I call bounded skepticism, where they're sort of being skeptical, but not as true skeptics like Michael Shermer, the amazing Randy, people such as that, go into a paranormal setting assuming this is not happening. Therefore, anything I see, there's an explanation. I'm not saying that's the right or wrong way to approach it. I'm just saying that that is the type of skepticism I don't see in paranormal groups. I see people saying, well, I don't believe everything I see. Just some of what I see is the sort of skepticism I see in paranormal groups. I haven't run into someone who is in a paranormal group who says, no, I don't believe in ghosts at all. Everything I see has a rational explanation or a reasonable explanation. I have not encountered that in paranormal groups at all. Paranormal groups definitely make a point of talking about how skeptical they are, and usually the point that they make is, well, other paranormal groups always find ghosts. We don't always find ghosts, therefore we're more skeptical. I don't know if that answers your question or not. That's just what I've seen, and that's not a dig on paranormal groups. It's just I'm literally telling you what I've seen.
Oh yeah, I understand that. I got you. Yeah, you're right about the skeptic thing. I mean, I'm in a group, so out of Norwalk. So, but yeah, and I'm the one that's the somewhat skeptic. I
Yeah,
believe in science. So if I can prove it, I'll believe it. Or if I
yeah,
can't
and
disprove
I
it,
agree with you.
I
I think
believe it's
that
possible.
yeah, and the reason I'm saying I don't, that when I'm thinking, when I'm thinking of sort of these true skeptics, and you probably know some of the people I'm talking about who just would say, if your house is haunted, you're wrong, without even going there, right? They would just say, no, it doesn't happen, therefore you are mistaken. Those people we don't generally find in paranormal groups. Sometimes, though, it's oftentimes part of a television show or something like that. One of these renowned skeptics will go into a place that's supposed to be haunted and tell you all the reasons why it's not. But I have not found those sort of skeptics as part of paranormal groups. That's a really interesting question, though.
Right, and we have a typed question from Christina. Really fascinating research. It's interesting that some believe in one thing, but not all of them. Have you found any characteristics about those who believe in numerous things, like Bigfoot, aliens, ghosts, etc.?
Yeah, when it comes to someone who believes in a lot of these things, people who believe in a lot of them oftentimes tend to have had an experience. That's one thing we found. That it seems that having a paranormal experience opens you up to multiple realms of the paranormal. We have found that people who have more experiences are definitely people that you would call spiritual but not religious. That again, the thing about religion is if you are very religious and very religious in a particular way, that tends to cut you off from other expressions. And so one of the strongest predictors of multiple beliefs we found are people who say, yeah, I'm spiritual, but I don't belong to a church. That they believe in, they'll use words like higher powers, like that, but they won't use words like God or Jesus. And what that's saying is this is someone who's expressing a belief that there are things out there that we cannot see. That's one of the biggest ones. Women tend to believe in more paranormal beliefs on average than men. We tend to find that African Americans believe in more on average than men, and people on the West Coast tend to believe in more of these items on average. So if I was to meet an African American woman on the West Coast and I was just a betting person and wanted to guess, I would guess that that person is believing in more than one of these things. But the question also mentioned that, kind of finding it fascinating. That to me is honestly one of the things I found the most fascinating. I just find it inherently fascinating, and I hear it all the time when someone says to me, "Here's this strange thing I saw, a ghost, a UFO, or Bigfoot," and the frequency with which they follow that up and what they will say, and it's sort of a way to sort of try to justify their sighting. They will then follow that up very often saying, "Well, I don't believe in everything. Like, I think Bigfoot is dumb. I think UFOs is dumb." And it's sort of a way for them to try to tell me that you should believe me because I don't believe in everything. And that's really common and surprising to me. I would think personally, if you believe in ghosts, you would have some sort of sympathy with people who believe in UFOs. But oftentimes I find in paranormal subcultures and paranormal believers, there's this tendency to talk about other groups and say why you don't do things like them or don't believe as much as they do. So are there any other questions that are typed out there, Kevin?
Nothing typed, but I have a question for you. You mentioned early on that paranormal beliefs change and evolve over time. Can you elaborate on what that looks like?
Sure. For example, ghost beliefs have really changed over time. That if you look, if you were to read a book, for example, some of the classic English books on ghosts from, say, the 1800s, you would find ghosts that you just wouldn't recognize, because one of the most common ghost stories that we don't hear as much today is that ghosts were commonly found guarding treasure. So that was where you would look for ghosts, that they were guarding treasure, oftentimes at crossroads. And that's just a genre that we don't hear today. I never hear any stories from the United States about ghosts guarding treasure. That the most common, what we have today is the idea that the reason that a ghost is here is because it has some sort of unresolved issue, that it's a person that died in a traumatic way, something like that. In terms of Bigfoot, one thing that has really evolved in the US over time in terms of beliefs in Bigfoot is this growing belief among certain segments that Bigfoot might not be actually an undiscovered animal. That this was a small belief that's always been there, but it's been growing exponentially over time. The idea that Bigfoot is an interdimensional creature, that it could jump into portals, that it's maybe an extraterrestrial. This was an extreme fringe belief in the 1970s and 80s that's becoming a big part of this culture now, so big that the Bigfoot culture is fracturing because of it. That there are certain parts of the Bigfoot subculture that believe this is just a monkey and you could shoot it and you could catch it and you could catalog its hair, and others that believe, no, this is some sort of higher nature spirit and you will never catch it. And those two groups dislike each other. They, if I've been to conferences where both groups are there and they put themselves in different parts of the room, they make fun of each other the whole time. So this is something that's very common in paranormal subcultures, that our understanding or ideas, even what they look like, Bigfoot's appearance has evolved over time. And of course, that's not to say these things could still be real, because we do know that over time, culture can affect things and the way that we view things that are real. So this is not an argument against saying that Bigfoot exists. I don't know whether Bigfoot exists or not, but we definitely know that whatever Bigfoot is, our ideas about what it is change.
Anyone else have any questions for Dr. Bader?
Oh, you got a shy group here.
I'm well, not really a question, but it's funny because Mr. Bader, you're talking about the skeptic that's like, I believe in a higher being, but that's pretty much me. I'm what I call agnostic, and I'm part of a paranormal group. My wife, who is actually a practicing witch, so she's very religious,
Right.
But yeah, and we belong to a paranormal group together. But I'm the type that I believe it's possible. I just haven't had that personal experience yet to make me totally believe, So,
Yep.
And that same thing with Bigfoot, UFOs. I believe it's possible. I just want the proof. So,
Yep.
I just had to say that because you were talking about it. So,
yeah, no, I think I appreciate that. That's an interesting observation, and yeah, that being agnostic and being a Wiccan are both common in paranormal groups. And I have to be careful how I say this, because I don't want to make it seem like I don't think Wicca is a legitimate religion, because it is. But there are certain religions that are sort of legitimated by culture, that I would say that we have a Christian culture. That is not a moral statement. That to me is just a fact. If you look at the percentage of Americans that believe, most of them believe in Christianity. Most of them say that we are a Christian culture. Most of them say that America should be run on Christian principles. So we are a Christian culture. And so someone who is Wiccan and an extremely devout Wiccan, I would say is practicing a religion for sure, but they're practicing a religion that's outside the cultural mainstream. So that allows them or frees them to be in a paranormal group. So that's very frequent. What I tend to find in paranormal groups, I do not tend to find in paranormal groups unless they have a focus specifically on demons, and I can answer questions about that if you want, but tend to find people who are either not Christian but religious. So they might be Buddhist or Hindu or Wiccan, or agnostic or atheist. Less common atheist, more common agnostic or spiritual.
We have a type question.
Sure.
What are your thoughts as to why so many people believe in one thing, such as ghosts, but are skeptical of other things? So why do they pick just one?
Why do they pick just one? what I suspect there, I don't have survey data to back this up, so this is based on my hundreds of times I've talked to people who claim paranormal experiences, is that it's sort of it's a self-protective mechanism in a certain way that I'm not someone who collects evidence on UFOs or Bigfoot or ghosts. I collect survey data and spend time with these groups, but people still do call me all the time or come up to me all the time when they know what I do and want to sort of give a confessional. They want to reveal to me their paranormal experience. But oftentimes I find that when people want to tell you a paranormal experience, the biggest thing that they're worried about is that you're going to think that they just believe anything, that they believe anything and everything. And so people generally, when they tell me a paranormal experience, will tell me that they've had this experience, but then go to great pains to tell me all the other things they don't believe in. I saw a ghost, but I don't believe in a flat earth. I saw a ghost, but I don't believe everything is real. So, and I've seen that tendency amongst paranormal groups as well, that there's a real tendency among paranormal investigation groups to talk as much about what they don't believe as what they do, because that's a way that they can demonstrate that they're not just gullible. And so as soon as you say that you believe in the paranormal or you've had an experience, you raise the specter, so ironic way to put it, that people will think you're just generally stupid or gullible or believe everything you see. So there's a real tendency amongst ourselves when we believe in something paranormal to reject other things. And I've seen that over and over.
So I have a follow-up question to that. And if anyone else has any questions that they'd like to type, there is a chat box. You can see the little voice bubble in the upper right. You can type your questions if you would like. But following up on that, what's been the reaction to your research? You're kind of a neutral observer. How has your research been received by both people on the skeptical side and in the paranormal community?
Well, it depends, but I would say almost nobody is happy with it, because I have friends in the hardcore skeptical community, and you can read reviews of my books in the hardcore skeptical community, and they don't like my books because they want me to come out and say, here's what people believe, and by the way, they're wrong. That's what the skeptics want me to say, because hardcore skeptics are disturbed by the fact that people even believe in ghosts. So hardcore skeptics have been somewhat hard on my work because they think I haven't gone far enough, that for some reason I need to get out there and say, well, ghosts don't exist. My perspective on that is I don't know that they exist or not, and frankly, I don't care from a sociological perspective. That's not the important question as a sociologist. I've found sometimes paranormal groups have been more receptive to me. I've found sometimes they don't like the fact that I talk about these patterns, that I talk about some of the things that I've seen in these groups, such as how they tend to dismiss other groups, that they think that just the fact that I'm talking about ghosts as a belief is somehow being dismissive. So I have received negative responses from all sides of the equation, but also I need to be clear too that I've found paranormal groups to be pretty welcoming once they actually talk to me and realize that I'm not trying to study them to make fun of them or to try to. I think the most common misconception the paranormal groups have of me is that I'm there to try to document why they're wrong or what's wrong with them. And once they realize that that's not my purpose, then usually they open up to me and they're quite friendly. I have great relationships with a lot of paranormal groups. I see a question on the chat that asks, is there more paranormal activity in a graveyard as opposed to a haunted house? I can only tell you here what my ghost hunting friends that I've spent time with have told me, and this is not necessarily reflective of what other paranormal groups might say, because I've never surveyed about this. I have had paranormal groups tell me, I know there's some ghost hunters here, maybe they would want to chime in and tell me if they would believe differently, but I've had my ghost hunting friends tell me that they do not believe that there should be much paranormal activity in a graveyard, because that is just where the body is and not where the spirit is. That I have most of my ghost hunting friends tell me that where you're going to find a spirit is the home where a person lived and doesn't feel like they can leave, or the home or location where that person had a traumatic experience which isn't allowing them to leave. So a lot of my ghost hunting friends that I've spent time with across the country wouldn't spend much time in graveyards. They would spend more time in haunted houses or haunted locations or asylums, places like that. I'm not seeing any other typed questions. If anyone wants to.
If anyone wants to, add any type questions or unmute yourself and ask a voice question, you're welcome to do so.
Yeah, don't be shy. You can ask me any question you want. I'm impossible to offend. So.
You've alluded to it a couple times here, and I read your book, so I got to read some of your experiences. But what has been your experience going out into you call it field research, going out with the paranormal groups and meeting paranormal enthusiasts?
Yeah, I mean that's a broad question. I mean, specifically, what do you want to know about it? That's a big, do you just want me to talk about in general what it's like to go out in the field with people?
Yeah, I mean, I know you've been on, Bigfoot hunts and ghost hunts. What did you do? What did that look like? And, what did you find out about the people while you were, in the process of hunting?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can talk about one specifically. In fact, I have, I think I could show you some pictures of one. Let me jump. No, I have a ghost investigation. That's a picture from a ghost investigation. Yeah, I've been out on a lot of ghost hunts, been on a lot of Bigfoot hunts, been to innumerable psychics to have my, I've lost count on how many times I've had my aura read or my future read or my palm read. But in terms of Bigfoot hunters, the one thing I learned about them is, again, it was spending time with the Bigfoot hunters that I learned about this big bifurcation in their community between the folks that believe Bigfoot is just a undiscovered ape and those who believe it's an interdimensional traveler, how those groups really dislike each other. Most of the groups I've spent time with in the field are people who believe that Bigfoot is just an undiscovered animal. And if you believe that, what I saw with these people is that most of these people who are in that group are people who live very sort of mainstream lives outside of the fact that they believe they've had a Bigfoot sighting. So they really, really, really want to kill a Bigfoot because to them, that's something they can use to prove to everyone that makes fun of them for seeing one that it's real. So I've spent a lot of time in the woods with heavily armed people who are looking to shoot a Bigfoot if they see one. And what I learned from them was that how they were really trying to make what they were doing into a form of science. And they were sort of obsessed with their equipment, that they had developed to hunt for Bigfoot, obsessed with making ranks within themselves, so they kind of sounded more scientific. So what I noticed amongst the Bigfoot hunters was this almost obsession with mainstream credibility, at least the ones who believe it's an ape. And that really affects everything that they do. And in fact, it made that one of the easiest groups to get into in terms of having them trust me, is that because they were so interested in having mainstream credibility that having a PhD with them was something that was very good for them. I should say here, just because it's important ethically, that I never infiltrate groups. I don't go into a group pretending to be a ghost hunter. They always know who I am, why I'm there, what I'm doing. So that's a plus for some groups and a minus for others. Some don't want a PhD coming in and watching what they're doing. I'm happy to answer any more, any specific questions about ghost hunts or Bigfoot hunts that I've been on, or if anyone has any questions like that.
I got one more for you. It's pretty much a social study is what you did, surveys and all that kind of stuff. What drew you to do it on paranormal? And you can do that anything. I'm just wondering what drew you to do it on paranormal.
Sure, a couple of things. One is I'm just interested in it. I was one of those kids that grew up. I grew up in Washington State, first of all. Heavy Bigfoot sightings in Washington State. I was one of those kids that grew up watching the $6 Million Man fight Bigfoot, watching In Search Of, watching shows like that, Legend of Boggy Creek. Those are all shows that were sort of what I grew up with. And if you grew up in Washington State, Bigfoot is everywhere. It's a mascot. People report sightings. I was sure, just as a kid, not because of any real evidence, but that Bigfoot lived in the woods that was close to my house. So I'm someone who grew up with an interest in this stuff. But as I became a sociologist, I had an interest in lots of things. A lot of my work is in criminology, other areas. But the thing that I noticed was simply that this area that interests me personally, nobody is actually studying from a sociological perspective. Academics who tend to study the paranormal tend to study it from a, why do people believe stuff like this? And here's why you shouldn't perspective. And I hadn't seen anybody come in and just simply study the beliefs, how they've grown, how they've changed, who believes them, without trying to prove or disprove. And so it was a combination of an interest and an opening that simply nobody was doing it. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, it did. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'm glad you did it. I mean, it's really interesting what you've been telling us. So thank you.
Great. Yeah, you bet.
I have one question for you, Dr. Baker. Clearly, I think in the last 50 to 75 years, at least in America, fewer people are religious, at least as far as organized formal religion. More identify as agnostic or atheist, as you sort of touched on. Do you think in that same period, are more people believing in paranormal? Is that a trend that's going upwards? If it is there any correlation between lack of faith in an organized religion and more in the paranormal? Does that fill some kind of void or something like that?
What a great question, Patrick. Yeah, that's a great question, and the answer is well, first let me say, you know, when we talk about 50 to 75 years, unfortunately, we just don't have good survey data going back. So I can't tell you how much things have changed since the 1970s and 80s and 90s to today, because no one was studying this stuff. And that frustrates me a lot. So we'll never be able to answer your question about how are things different from the 1970s to now. What we can do is we can answer questions since myself and others have been doing this type of work for about the last 15 years. And first of all, you are absolutely correct, Patrick, that rapidly increasing numbers of people, percentage of people in the United States are what we call nuns. I have to be careful how we spell that, N-O-N-E-S, not N-U-N. What nuns are people who say that when you ask them what religion they are, you give them a long list of religions, they say none of the above. That's why we call them nuns. So nuns are people that don't belong to any organized religion. And right now in the United States, that's up to about 20% of people in the United States, and that's up from about 10% 15 years ago. So it's a rapidly growing percentage of people in the United States. It is a mistake, a huge mistake, and it really pisses me off, pardon my language, whenever I see a newspaper reporter say that atheism is increasing in the United States, because it's not. Most of these people who are nuns, the vast majority of them are people who say, I just don't believe in any of these organized religions, or they don't appeal to me. But they will usually say, I believe in God, I just don't know what God is. Or I don't think religion gets to tell me what God is. I believe that there's a higher powers. I believe that there's something out there. And that type of person, the type of person who believes that there is something out there, that is extremely powerfully related to believing in the paranormal. It's one of the best predictors, being a nun. So yes, absolutely. If the ranks of nuns continue to increase, and I do believe that they will, then paranormal beliefs are going to increase alongside them. And in the 15 years for which I have data, I've already been seeing it. Most of these paranormal beliefs have increased by 2 to 3 to 4 points over time. And that is as the nuns are increasing as well. So to sum up, you asked me something I'm passionate about, Patrick, so sorry for the long, wordy answer, but hopefully I answered the question. That basically cannot answer it for you for any time earlier than 2000, because the data just doesn't exist, and we'll never be able to answer that question. But I can tell you from 2000 until now, nuns have been increasing and the paranormal has been increasing right along with it, and I do believe the two are connected.
And
I see the, sorry, go ahead.
Well, we do have a typed question, and I think it came to me, not necessarily to where you can see it. But someone would like you to talk about the concept of demons and how that factors into your studies.
Sure. Demons are really interesting from a sociological perspective, because they're one of these beliefs that really crosses over between religion and the paranormal. because if you go to a church, a conservative one, you will hear about demons. If you go to many ghost hunting groups, you will hear about demons, or there's different names for demons that ghost hunting groups often use. They oftentimes don't use the term demon. They use the term such as inhuman entities, terms such as that, which sort of rob it of its religious overtones. But yes, there are some ghost hunting groups, and they generally are composed of people who are agnostics or non-Christian religious groups that simply don't believe that demons or inhuman entities exist. That what they will tend to tell me is that if you have something in your house and it seems to be negative or it seems to be violent, that's just someone who was a jerk when they were a human being. Basically, what I've had a couple of ghost hunters tell me is if you had the ghost of a serial killer, that would be a very nasty ghost. And that's all negative entities are nasty ghosts. When I find religious groups where I have people who in them that are either Christians themselves or raised Christian or more amenable to Christian ideas, they tend to be more likely to believe that when they're going into an investigation, they may either encounter a ghost or they may encounter something that a Christian group would call demons. So I've seen that in both groups. They're an interesting crossover area, but what I've definitely found is that those groups that have a Christian background within them, or a lot of members that have a Christian background or affiliation, those are the ones that tend to believe that a house could have demons. So it's sort of that crossover area between religion and the paranormal. I see here in the chat, someone has asked, what are we looking at in this picture here? This picture was taken in Jefferson, Texas, outside a place called the Big Cypress Coffee House. This is a place that is supposed to be, this is what the story says, infested with 150 demons. So this is a place that's supposed to have a demonic haunting. And this is one of those cases where I oftentimes have people, ask me, you've been in all these places, have you ever had a paranormal encounter? My answer is it depends on who you ask, because this is a photo that was taken by one of the people that went with me here, and one of the ghost hunters who was here on this trip says that there's a ghost in the picture. And are you able to see my mouse pointer, Kevin?
Yes, yeah, we see you circling the orb in this.
This is it. So again, this is a picture. It was taken by a member of my group, and one of the ghost hunters who was on this excursion says that right there is one of the ghosts or demonic entities. So I have a picture of a ghost if you believe that that's what that is. That's, to me, I don't know what that is. It's just a light. It's a, I'm not saying it's not a ghost. I'm just saying I literally don't know what it is. I'm not a camera expert. This is not what I do. I'm not a skeptic who comes in and tells you that light that you have is dust or a lens flare or something like that. Not because I don't think that's what it couldn't be. It could be just simply because that's not my expertise. I'm not a camera expert. It actually bugs me when people who are an expert in one thing pretend that they can therefore be an expert in all things. And I don't know what that is. It doesn't mean I think it's a ghost. It just means I don't know what it is. And there are other pictures. I will go to one here, see if I have one. This picture right here that's inside the building has a number of things that are supposedly paranormal going on. There are supposedly numerous, the portal where the demons are supposed to come out of in this building is back here. And supposedly, according to some ghost hunters that have seen these pictures, there are numerous spirits in this picture. Let me see if I have more on the next one. No. And this person on the floor here, she collapsed to the ground because she believed one of the demons had entered her. So in this next picture, the demon asked to talk to me alone. So this is myself alone in the room once everyone else has left, talking to her. This is a psychic who come along who is at this point speaking to me in a gravelly voice, saying that she is a demon. So when people ask me if I've had a paranormal experience, again, it's according to whom. I did stand in this room and talk to this person for 10, 15 minutes, who was speaking in a gravelly voice and claiming that she was possessed by a demon. So she would tell you, if you asked her, most definitely, Dr. Bader talked to a demon. I would say I talked to a woman who was speaking in the voice that was creepy. I don't know what it was. Again, that's not my job to tell you whether that is a demon or not. That's just what happened while I was there. I can answer the question before it's asked. No, she didn't levitate or turn her head around or throw me into the wall or something like that. There was nothing. I have never seen anything on any paranormal investigation. Again, this is not what I'm there for, but I've never seen anything personally that was inexplicable to me. I see a question here. Do you find a marked increase or decrease in belief in the paranormal based on if it's a time of relative peace versus violence or unrest? That's a great question. We just don't know yet because we don't have enough data. We need data over a long period of time to see if there's a relationship between periods of recession and depression. The data I have, which is over basically about 15 years, is not a long enough time period to see, because we don't have enough data. We have enough data on the point of belief. We don't have enough data on economic issues. So I don't know the answer to that question yet. I think we will know later. The next question I see on the chat was, have you ever had a psychic or possessed individual give you information that was specific to you? No, I've never, again, I can only talk about the times that I have been in these situations. I can't speak to other situations. I have never been impressed with a psychic. And again, that's not why I'm there. So I want to be clear about that, but I have never had a psychic tell me something that was shocking or that they shouldn't have known. In fact, one of the things I've gone to many psychic fairs, and where you can go from table to table and have a psychic give you a reading, have someone give you a reading based on your guardian angels, have someone give you a reading based on your aura, have someone read your palm. I've been to those and asked each psychic the same question and gotten radically different answers. So I've not personally seen anything. Again, it's not the point of my work, so I don't talk about it much, but no, I have not personally. This person who was saying to be possessed in this picture didn't say anything that they shouldn't have known. They didn't tell me the name of my uncle or anything like that. Didn't say anything about me. So I've heard those stories. I've heard those stories where someone says, here's a possessed person, and they speak a language they shouldn't know. They say something about you that no one could have known. I've heard those stories, never experienced it myself. Have you ever heard of a gathering of flies as being an indication of a spirit present? I see in the chat. Have heard that, haven't seen that. What ghost hunters have told me, again, I can't say that that's indicative of what all ghost hunters believe. Ghost hunters have told me that something like that, a gathering of flies or a strange sulfur-like smell, that's an indication that you don't have a ghost, but that you have an inhuman or demonic entity. That's what they've told me. Haven't seen it myself. I think I've answered all the questions in the chat, so we'll see if there's anything anybody else has here.
I have a question about what you call the most intense level of involvement, which is engagement. You're going to join a group, you're going to go ghost hunting. Has there been an increase in that over the time that you've researched?
Absolutely, there's been a big increase in that. While I can't know for certain, I think that a big part of it are the television shows. And part of what we've seen over the last 20 years certainly is what I call a democratization of the paranormal. And what I mean by that is the paranormal has become something that anybody can do. If you watch paranormal documentaries from back in the 1970s, they gave the sense that if you're going to be engaged with the paranormal, you need to be a professor with a bunch of equipment or some sort of specific celebrity to go and do a paranormal investigation. And also early documentaries suggested, well, you have to go to this location and be there at the right place at the right time. What all these television shows have demonstrated over time is that you can bring the paranormal to you, that you don't have to be lucky enough to see a ghost walk by at the right time, that if you go into a house and you bring the right equipment, if the ghost is anywhere nearby, it will come to you. And it will perform on command, so to speak, be it giving you an EVP or making lights light up or making a noise. Same with Bigfoot. Used to be with Bigfoot hunters, their goal was to get there as soon as possible after a sighting to make sure that the Bigfoot was possibly still there and hope they would see it too. Nowadays, Bigfoot hunters don't try to do that, that their goal is just to go to a place where Bigfoot has been sighted at some point in time because they believe a Bigfoot's around somewhere and they try to draw the Bigfoot to them by wood knocking or screaming. So that idea that anyone can go out in the woods, anyone can go to a haunted house with equipment, they don't have to be there at a certain time. If there's anything around, they can bring it to them, has dramatically opened up the world of the paranormal to everyone, especially since that equipment has become relatively cheap. So the demonstration of it on television and the access to this equipment, I think, is increasing this. It's becoming a popular hobby, particularly ghost hunting, because it's much easier to do than Bigfoot hunting. So not a sociological question, but has your research ever stated what language inhuman entities may have spoken prior to Latin, backwards Latin? No, I don't have an answer to that question. I've never, I'm not sure what language inhuman entities are proposed to have spoken. All I've heard is, yes, that what you're saying here is there's this common idea, at least, that, and we get this in television shows, that someone who's possessed is going to speak Latin. Haven't heard it happen myself. Don't actually even know anyone who says that they've heard it themselves personally. These are just stories that I've heard impersonally. So I don't know the answer to that question. That's been personally the rarest event that I've been able to get to. The Catholic Church hasn't wanted to let me be in on an exorcism. Even groups that are operating in my area that say they have demonic cases, they've never been able to bring me on one. So these are the stories that, at least for me, it's been rare that I encounter them myself. I think you said it was ending at 10. We've got time for probably one or two more questions if anyone has one.
If anyone else wants to type out a question or unmute themselves, feel free to ask. I know that the book that you have now is in its second edition. Is this research ongoing for you, and is it going to continue into the future?
Yeah, that I expect. I don't know if it will just continue to be successive editions of that book, but yes, I ask about paranormal questions on surveys every couple of years. So I will continue to have new data, and probably that book will be updated in another 5 years or so. That paranormal beliefs don't change much from year to year, so I tend to wait until I've seen some sort of interesting changes before I do that. The next project I'm going to be working on is called Paranormal Britain, and I'm going to be doing the same type of research in the UK, Scotland, Ireland, and England, looking to see. And what I'm basically going to be looking for there is to see if the same type of patterns we see in the United States, where non-religious people are the most likely to believe in and engage with the paranormal, and all these other patterns we see, do they also fit in the UK, or is that uniquely an American thing, the patterns that we see here? People are arriving right now. I think they must have had the time wrong, huh?
We do have
Okay,
one more in the chat box.
I see a question here. Are you a member of a ghost hunting and/or Bigfoot group? No, I'm not officially a member of any group. That I don't feel that my goal is to simply observe these groups. And what I try to do is called non-participant observation. I'm trying to just observe what they're doing, but not affect it myself, because I genuinely want to see what paranormal groups are doing. I don't want to be someone who affects what they're doing myself. Otherwise, I'm not watching what's truly happening. So my goal when I'm there is to try to be as much of a non-entity myself as possible. It doesn't always work, because paranormal groups oftentimes want to have me do things because they want me to see something. So they'll oftentimes sort of put me in the room where the ghost is supposed to be. My ideal would be just to watch. So I'm not a member of any group. I'm friends with a lot of these groups, and so they might consider me sort of a de facto member, but I don't join them because that would be at odds with my research.
All right, well, I think unless anybody had any last minute questions, we'll call it there.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bader, for your time today and for sharing some really fascinating research. I hope everyone enjoyed this. Again, this is a program in coordination with our exhibit, Ohio, and Unnatural History. If you haven't seen it yet, come check it out, where we talk about Ohio's ghost stories and monster legends, and we try to dissect folklore and why it's important to us. And then if you haven't picked up a copy of Dr. Bader's book, again, it's Paranormal America: Ghost Encounters, UFO Sightings, Bigfoot Hunts, and Other Curiosities in Religion and Culture. So thank you so much, Dr. Bader. Really appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thanks. Those were good questions. And if anyone in Ohio has got a ghost hunting group or goes to Salt Fork to hunt Bigfoot, write me an email. Let me come join you sometime.
All right. Well, thank you.
All right. Take care, everyone.